All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome back to my channel. Sorry for the late start. I wanted to start earlier, but I finished a stream on another channel, which ended late. And this is just the nature of the beast. Sometimes some content creators put up times and things just end up starting late. So today is going to be a lot of fun. My brother Amal, I'm going to welcome him back. And I think during my review of The Equalizer, which some people liked and some people didn't, he mentioned we should do a review of A Soldier Story, the classic play and the classic film A Soldier Story. And as I'll describe, at least for me, that's a part of my childhood experience. I watched that movie over and over and over again numerous times on our VHS. So I said, yeah, let's do it. So I'm going to play this quick intro, and then I'm going to welcome my brother back up, and we're going to talk about A Soldier Story, starring Denzel Washington and Adolph Caesar. And who else was in that? Howard Rollins, Larry Riley, David Allen Greer was in that. Patti LaBelle made a cameo in that. So Robert Townsend Jr. made a cameo in that. But yeah, we're going to talk about all that. And I will see you on the other side. And something happens during this battle that we had never seen in the cartoon series up to that point, which was some of the characters started dying. So that's what I think that episode was about. I think it said a lot. I think it was speaking to quite a bit. And it goes back to, at some point, can a population of people based upon race, can they eventually come together and stop the fighting and stop discriminating against one another? And so they get into this dialogue where Sal says, look, this is my pizzeria. If you want to have your own pizzeria, you can get your own pizzeria. But for now, in Sal's, they're up on the wall. Hierarchies, distinct classes, distinct sects of people. Sex, S-E-C-T-S, not S-E-X. Distinct groups of people where some people have access and some people don't, where some people are accepted and some people are not, when some people, that's a part of us as a species, that's a part of us as a race, and it's always been there, even if nobody's talking about it. Instead, bigoted anti-hero Archie, played by Carol O'Connor, and his dingbat wife Edith, played by Jean Stapleton, along with their rebelliously progressive daughter Gloria, Sally Struthers, and son-in-law Mike, i.e. Meathead, Rob Reiner, mined comedy gold out of hot-button subjects such as racism, rape, immigration, gun control, and homophobia. But Lieutenant Savick wanted to do everything by the book. She knew all the regulations, she knew all the rules, and she knew all of the standard operating procedures for Starfleet. Welcome to Big Discussions 76, Entertainment and Media. Here I discuss media of all kinds, movies, TV shows, favorite characters, book readings, retrospectives, sometimes music, all media, all of it. All right, everyone. In the next hour, me and my brother, the next hour or so, this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do a retrospective on A Soldier Story, the classic play and the classic movie. So right now, I'm going to welcome back my brother Amal Dunbar, and we're gonna have some fun in the next hour or so. And yeah, so we'll jump in. How you doing, bro?
Great, bro. Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. I think when we were kids, we went with our mom to the movies to see this, and yeah. So it's in. I was thinking last night, of all of the content that you and I have done together, and you've been nice enough to invite me on your platform a couple times. This is the one I think that will age well, and I think this review will be kid friendly. So for all of our younger cousins, they can watch this and they can get it and they can watch this later and it will have different meaning if they see the movie. So,
Oh boy, then I better not play some of my Sergeant Waters drops.
okay.
I mean, but it's in the movie. It's in the movie. It's part of it.
Yeah,
It's part
yeah,
of Black
yeah,
history, and
yeah,
as we'll see, so much of this film, and it was a stage play first. So much of this relates to what's going on today, even with
yeah,
all the chaos and the bizarre things we're seeing. This still relates to what's happening today in our family, in our communities. No matter which college you go away to, if you go to college, no matter which job you fall into, this relates. There's so much here in this movie, and I was thinking that this is kind of in the area of The Color Purple. It's not propaganda. Many people believe The Color Purple was propaganda. They're coming out with a new one. I don't know why, but I probably got myself in trouble with that. But
no,
but,
no,
but,
no,
but this movie is not propaganda. This movie really is art imitating life. Uh,
yeah,
and so I'm wearing brown today. The one of the color themes of the movie. Oh, he's got his copy too. Was brown. So I decided not to go with the
yeah.
superhero Super Mario Brothers, Transformers T. I decided to go with brown. So I'll start with our history of it. Well, first of all, before we jump in, bro, what made you propose doing this retrospective?
Um, I think I went to visit our father sometime last year, and he was upstairs watching it. Normally when you and I go to visit him, we sleep in the downstairs unit. And I think it was on Friday. I went upstairs and it was late. It's probably 10:30 or later, and he was already watching it. And I was thinking, I mean, I was I'm very careful as to what kind of content that I choose to watch because that content will stay with you for a little while. And I remember how heavy that this movie is. I was thinking, I don't know if I want to watch this. I don't want that kind of heaviness on me, over the next couple of days. But I said, you know what, man, just sit down and watch it with your father, and whatever, however you feel afterwards is how you feel afterwards. You just have this precious time with your father. And after watching it, after catching like the latter half, I just thought, wow, this is so powerful. This resonates with what's happening, in our country, especially amongst our people, African Americans, FBAs, ADOS, however you want to characterize us. A lot of these issues are still prevalent. So I thought, wow, this is such a special piece of art that has so much to teach people, about our past and also about our present. That it would be cool to do a review of this now, especially seeing it as how we saw it when we were kids, but now we're we're in our late 40s, and we would be older than many of the actors who were in the movie when they shot and produced this, but also we would be older than the characters. So we're seeing this with another with a different lens.
Okay. Yeah. So I think this is a good time to. I have a couple of links queued up here, and I'm unlike the last StreamYard. I think when you do the screen share sometimes, and you have cameras on, it's a lot of information for the software transmitting to YouTube to process. So I'm going to show links. I'm not going to keep them up for the entire time like we did with Blue Beetle. I just want to make sure the show quality is good. So it turns out that A Soldier Story was an off-Broadway play. Okay, so you have Broadway plays, and I'm not an expert on plays, but it was an off-Broadway play initially, which premiered in 1981. That means I was 5 and you were 7. Yeah, you were 7.
Yes.
And then it was adapted to the silver screen, the big screen, in 1984. So Hollywood saw how much of a gem this was. Someone saw how much of a gem this movie was, and said, "Okay, we have to put this in movie form." It was, and I read this article last night. So after 40 years, the Soldier Story play finally marches onto Broadway. And in this article, I'm not going to read this verbatim. Charles Fuller, who wrote A Soldier Story, he noted that, yeah, I knew it wasn't going to be uh, Broadway. It wasn't going to be accepted on Broadway uh, at that time because of some of the things that I communicated in it, and especially with the last line, which is Captain Davenport, and I can't remember his superior. He basically told him, "Yeah, well, you better get ready to see more Black people in executive and commanding positions." So Charles Fuller basically said, "Yeah, people weren't ready to hear that type of thing at that time, so it's not a surprise to me that this play did not go to Broadway until much later after its inception." So this is Charles Fuller. I just want to show everyone who this is for the sake of history. This article is from the New York Times. This is from 2022. So he just passed. So this is entitled Charles Fuller, Pulitzer Prize winner for A Soldier Story. A Soldier Story's play dies at 83. He was the second Black playwright to win the award, and later adapted the play into an Oscar-nominated film, A Soldier Story. And there was something in the second paragraph. Yeah, so Mr. Fuller, this is just some brief background. Mr. Fuller was only the second Black playwright to win the Pulitzer Prize for drama. His plays often examined racism and sometimes drew on his background as an Army veteran. Okay, so he was an Army veteran himself, so he saw this stuff. Both of those elements were evident in A Soldier's Play, which was Mr. Fuller's reimagining of Herman Melville's Billy Budd, and centered on the murder of a Black Army sergeant and the search for the culprit. So it was, as we'll describe, it was a bit of a whodunit type of thing. So that's a bit of a background on the play. It's on Broadway now, and that's who wrote it. So yeah, so the movie came out in 1984. Unlike The Color Purple, I don't recall going to the theater to see it. I was young, I was young, so I do remember our Uncle Bodine. When family watches this, they'll know who Uncle Bodine is. I do remember him leaving a bunch of VHSs at our home. And I remember binge watching it then. And that's when I really, I remember seeing a little bit, but then I remember really binge watching it when Uncle Bodine left all those VHS tapes at our house, because he videotaped a lot of movies. So that's our history. That's our history with The Soldier Story. Do you want to say anything about that, bro?
Yeah, I would be curious to know, seeing as how the author's name, the author's first name is Charles, the character of CJ Memphis, which is a very catchy name. It almost sounds too good to be true. Definitely sounds like a made up name for the story. I would be curious to know if the CJ character, if Charles, what was his last name?
Fuller.
Fuller. If Charles Fuller created the CJ character after himself, I'm curious as to what CJ, what are those initials for? But that was it.
Okay.
That's all.
So now I'm gonna pull up the embed, and we'll take a quick look at the cast and the crew, and then we'll walk through the plot, and then we'll discuss the significance of the movie
Okay.
today. So this is the embed. I'm not going to leave this up for the entire stream. Everyone can Google search this pretty easily. But embed gives nice summaries of movies and their casts and their crews. And let's see, is it coming up for me? Let's see. Oh, I see the blue rectangle.
I can see
There it
it.
is. Yeah, I can see it now.
There's no
So while that
audio.
does what it's doing, so this, yeah, I'm not going to turn that on. I don't want to get a copyright. So this is the embed link for Soldier Story. It was released in 1984. I'm sorry, 1984. Let me slow down. So once again, I was 8 years old. That means you were 10. It was directed by Norman Jewison. It was written by Charles Fuller, and it starred all of these people. This was an amazing cast. Howard
Yes.
Rollins Jr. Many of you might remember him from Heat of the Night. In the Heat of the Night,
Yes.
he was on that for a while. Adolph Caesar, arguably the star of the movie. I think Howard Rollins Jr. was the star of the movie, but arguably Adolph Caesar was the star of the movie. Art
Yeah.
Evans played Wilkie.
Yes.
Art Evans has been in a lot of things. He played Ron's dad in a different world. David Allen Greer, I think he's on the Broadway production now. Most of my childhood, as I came of age, I remember David Allen Greer from In Living Color as a
Yep.
comedian, and
Yep.
then he made appearances in Martin as that pastor. But he was a serious actor too. He has that range as well. So let's see. David Harris played Private Smalls. Okay, Dennis Lipscomb played Captain Taylor. That was Captain Davenport's superior, who he was talking to at the end. Larry Riley played C.J. Memphis. Robert Townsend made a cameo playing Corporal
Yeah.
Ellis. Denzel, the Equalizer.
The Equalizer.
Malcolm X, No Better
Yeah.
Blues. Not, everything. This was one of Denzel's first big movies.
Yeah.
Glory, Man, Man Out of Time, all those. This was one of his first big roles. So he played Peterson. William Allen Young played Henson, the pianist. Patti LaBelle made a cameo as Big
Yeah.
Mary.
Wow.
Wings Hauser played Lieutenant Byrd. Scott Paulin played Lieutenant Wilcox, and John Hancock played Sergeant Washington, and then Trey Wilson played Colonel Nevins. Okay, and no one else here is pictured, so those are minor roles. But that's the cast. This was a brilliant cast, the way they were put together and the way they all fit together, and that's who acted in this movie. So it was a mostly male cast, and at that time, the military, that's consistent because the military was mostly male, so that was consistent. So I'll minimize this, bro. Do you have anything to say about that cast and their roles?
I am looking at the cast on Google, and there were two scenes where the Howard Rollins character of Captain Davenport went to visit with Colonel Nevins, who was the CO of the base at his home. and Colonel Niven's wife was played by Patricia Brandcamp, right? And in those two scenes, whenever she spoke to Colonel Davenport, she always gave him this really awkward look and had this really awkward energy about him, and or about her. And I was, the movie never goes into any detail, but she always just gave him these strange looks as though she was very uncomfortable around him, and she may have just been uncomfortable seeing uh, a black officer, which a large part of the first act, characters in the film look at Colonel Davenport, played by Howard Rollins, as though he's an alien. Like they hadn't seen a black officer look that clean, that sharp, that well put together ever. So that may be why she was giving him those side eyes and that awkward energy was because she herself had never seen a black officer. So
Yeah. Okay. So I think, bro, I think that's a good segue into the plot and what actually happens in it. This is a 40-year-old movie. So,
wow.
so if you haven't seen it, you get a DVD or a Blu-ray or download it on Amazon
Streaming.
Prime. It's everywhere. So
Yeah.
it's a whodunit. So it starts with this class with these classic lines by Sergeant Waters. And all my drops are Sergeant Waters. There's so many lines in here, but I chose to center this on Sergeant Waters. So the movie starts with this.
They still hate you.
So Sergeant Waters is the movie starts with Sergeant Waters juicing. That's what they called it, juicing pretty heavy. It takes place in Tynan, Louisiana. And I think they really did a good job capturing the South in that era. When you watch this movie, you really feel like you're there. Everything from their uniforms to the town to you can almost imagine the temperatures that they were in. And I think they just really did a good job in terms of setting. So he's juicing at the bar. Patti LaBelle is singing. All the guys are having a good time, and they show him stumbling down the street. And then all of a sudden, you see this scene of him. He's bloodied up. His uniform is dirty, and he's telling somebody, they still hate you. And then they flash to this pistol. It fires twice, and then he flies back in slow motion, and he's dead. And so the question is, who shot him? And who would have wanted to shoot this colored officer. And so as you just described, bro, in that time and in that era in the South, and probably in the Army in general, black officers were given the side eye. They as they describe in the movie, there's a difference between an officer and non-commissioned officers. So I'm not a military guy, but I know that I think the officers are usually white collar educated guys. So they're usually lawyers and they have some
Yes.
sort of formal white collar training. And then your non-commissioned officers, those are guys who are coming in off the street. They're usually put on the front lines. I think it's everything from sergeant down. So that delineation is described in the movie. So when Captain Davenport shows up, he's a lawyer. He's been tasked with solving this murder and figuring out who did it. Okay, so and that feeds into what my brother just talked about how when he went to go talk to Colonel Nivens, I mean everybody in the town, even the black officers, were looking at him like they were stopping and staring, like, wow. Look at him. He's so clean. There's a black officer. He's wearing the hat. He's got the jacket, the bars. He's carrying a briefcase. And everybody in that town was looking at him like they had seen a ghost. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way the plot unfolds is that Captain Davenport ends up interviewing everybody who knew Sergeant Waters, everyone from Captain Nivens to Sergeant Waters' platoon, and we're going to talk about his platoon shortly. Who are the two white gentlemen? Captain Wilcox and Lieutenant Byrd. We find out that they had encountered Sergeant Waters on that night that he died. So Captain Davenport questions him, and he even has to get permission to talk to them because he's a black officer and they're white officers, and that was seen as a form of disrespect. The fact that a black officer would go, and I don't want to say interrogate because that's a different thing, but he would go and interview them about what happened. And when he does, they make the case that we saw him. It got a little physical, but we didn't kill the guy. He was still there when we left him. So the question is, who killed Sergeant Waters and why? So I don't want to dominate the conversation, bro. So I'll say that as the movie goes along, and the reason I said that arguably the reason Sergeant Adolph Caesar is the star of the movie is because as the movie goes along, we gradually learn more and more and more about who Sergeant Waters was and how everybody around him felt about him. Do you want to say anything?
Well, as Captain Davenport begins his investigation, when he gets to, I think he interviews Private Wilkie several times, at least twice, and I think in the second interview Private Wilkie tells a story about how they were hanging out at the bar, and Sergeant Waters passed around a picture of his wife and kid and spoke about how he was going to use whatever assets and funds that he got from being in the Army to sending his son to college, and that he was going to, rub shoulders with the whites and learn how they do things and speak as they speak. That was probably one of the few times that you heard anything positive about Sergeant Waters. In the other interviews, as he interviewed the other members of the platoon, you just hear just the worst of the worst. And actually, I would dare say that Sergeant Waters had a mental illness. I think a small part of him hated himself, and he took that out on any soldier of any rank that was below him on the base. If they were anywhere near him, and he felt like, well, you were from the South, or you were too country, or you didn't understand what was going on, or you didn't understand how being a part of the military was actually a privilege, and that you could benefit off this and learn things through these experiences that would help you in the outside world, once you were done with your, a tour, or your obligations, or your time with the military.
Your tour of duty.
Yeah. Well, at the end of your tour of duty, what did you learn, and what can you bring into the real world, to move yourself and your family forward.
Yeah. So going back to Private Wilkie, he told that story about his family, and then the first story is him disciplining and chastising Private Wilkie and taking his stripes.
Yes.
Demoting him from sergeant to private because Wilkie was drunk on guard duty. So he gives this depiction of Sergeant Waters of a very scathing and disciplinary individual. And then they're all in the bar. The sergeants, they're talking and drinking, and he talks about how he wants his son to go to a white school and rub elbows with the whites and learn the white man's language and how the white man does things. I thought that was significant.
Mm-hmm.
And Wilkie communicates, and we talk about this today amongst each other. A lot of us didn't have the same opportunities those white boys had. And that's when the dialogue says, well, Sergeant Waters says, well, that's no excuse. My father shoveled coal, but he made sure that we could go to school. So that's the whole bootstraps. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You're not restricted by what opportunities you're not given. And then Wilkie makes a joke and says, you can't get pee from a tree, Sergeant. He starts laughing, and some of the other guys start laughing. Adolf Caesar acts this out really well. He takes a swig of his whiskey, sets it down, and he looks at him, looks him up and down like that, and he says, you're just like the rest of them, Wilkie. Ignorant, scared. And then he says the word. He says the word, bro. He says, stop thinking like a nigger. So Sergeant Waters flipped it just like that. Family man, this is what I'm going to do with my son. And then all of a sudden, once he sees that element of Black people that he didn't like, he flipped it. Okay. And that was just the tip of the iceberg about how Sergeant Waters saw his people and what he was feeling about Black people and how they related to the rest of the world on the inside. That was just the tip of it.
Very powerful scene. Very powerful scene.
Yeah. So then moving on, we see he goes and he talks to Captain Davenport, talks to Peterson, played by Denzel, right? And we see that they have a baseball league in the Army, and it's segregated. So Sergeant Waters' platoon is all Black, and then they're playing a white platoon. And then if you look at the stands, you see the stands are segregated as well, and the Black team has a cheering section of sisters who came over, and I think we see CJ Memphis for the first time, and he's a really talented athlete. The white team hits the ball, and the ball goes flying out into the outfield, and CJ runs it down and catches it, right? Yeah. Denzel bunt the ball. And then we see CJ strike out twice, and then he hits this home run, and then he trots around, and it's a celebratory moment because they beat the white team, right? Okay? And Sergeant Waters is coaching them, and he seems to be dialed in and enjoying the game as well.
That was interesting. Yeah,
that was interesting. So afterwards, they're in their barracks, celebrating after the win, drinking beers, goofing off, having a good time. They just won the game. They just beat the white team.
Right.
CJ, breaks out his guitar. He starts strumming, and we see him perform earlier in the movie anyway. So we know CJ is a talented musician, and they're clowning around, and he puts some jabs at Sergeant Waters in there, right? And it's funny because if you watch that scene, the way they position the camera, CJ is feeling it, and Wilkie is sitting there, and he turns and he sees Sergeant Waters.
Yeah.
He turns and he sees Sergeant Waters walk in. And they're all playing, having a good time, and then all of a sudden they see him, and then they freeze.
They kind of yeah.
So then we see that scene gives us more insight, or a different insight, into who Sergeant Waters is and how he feels about his men. So they were just playing, they beat the white team, they're having a good time, and Sergeant Waters walks in, he tells them, knock it off. We don't need any more guitar picking sitting around the shack music today, CJ. See, I've watched it a million times.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, he tells them, we have a work detail at 4:00. So these guys are celebrating. They just beat this team. They're having a good time. They're drinking their beers, and Sergeant Waters walks in, and he says, hey, all right, get out of those uniforms. We have a work detail. We're painting the officers club or something like that. So that sets up a conflict. You want to say anything about that?
The movie does such a good job of making the audience feel as though wherever they are in Alabama, Tynan, Alabama,
it's Louisiana.
It is. Thank you.
Deep South.
It is deep South. That it is really hot there. So, they show this platoon in their barracks after they played a baseball game out in the heat. And, the Sarge walks in and tells them to change because we have a work duty or a work detail. I'm thinking in my mind, what a day. I mean, these guys got up, played a baseball game in the heat. They beat the other team 9 or 10-0. And now they're going to go paint the officers club. I mean, what a rough and long day that would be. Like Sarge didn't think, okay, give these guys the rest of the days off, the rest of the day off. He wanted them to go and do some more work.
Mhm.
If that were me, I wouldn't have been surprised. Uh, and B, those guys shouldn't have been surprised because they knew the Sarge's character. I don't know what happened in previous games. They don't show you what happened in previous games or what they did after those games. But yeah, that would have been a rough day. That would have been a long day for anyone.
Yeah. So there are two things. So he comes in and he basically says, okay, the celebration is over. We have to get back to work. That's the first thing. But it's the way he does it. He's rude to his men. He's disparaging to his men. He's insulting of his men. And yeah, you could see that there's some sort of disdain for his men, and you can cut it with a knife, right? And that's when we see Peterson, played by Denzel Washington, actually stand up to him. But he stands up to him after, for the first time, we see Sergeant Waters communicate his disdain for CJ Memphis. I have a brief drop for this.
You trying to mock me, CJ?
No, Sir Sarge.
Good. Because whatever an ignorant, low-class Geechee like you has to say ain't worth paying attention to. Is it? Is it?
So he insults CJ and he bullies him. Now, CJ did kind of, I guess, to try to mock him a little bit, but he insults him and he bullies him in a very, very severe way. And that's when Peterson feels the need to step up and question Sergeant Waters. And initially, Waters, I don't think, pays him any mind, but it gets to the point where Peterson asks him, what kind of colored man are you? And that's when Sergeant Waters whips around like this. And he said, oh, this dude is questioning my authority. He's questioning my blackness. He's okay. And that's when he says, Wookie, we have a wise ass Alabama boy here. And that's when they come almost to the brink of conflict, which they eventually get to. But that's when there's a bit of a standoff. And what's interesting there is you can see the other guys when Peterson really digs in. You see all the other guys kind of get up and go, and they go stand behind Sergeant Waters, even though they don't like him, even though they don't like how he treated them. They get up and they go stand behind him, and Peterson is standing there, by himself. Hold on.
He was.
You want to hit old Sergeant Waters, boy? Come on. Please. Come on, nigga.
When I was making these drops, I didn't realize how many times Sergeant Waters said that word.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it communicates how he felt about his men, particularly the Southern ones. And he was very, very loose with that word. Now, what's interesting is that right when they're about to fight initially, that's when Captain Nivens walks in and Sergeant Waters. Captain Taylor. Yep, Captain Taylor walks in and Sergeant Waters straightens up. And Captain Taylor says, what's going on here? Oh, nothing, sir. They're showing him some batting practice. And when you watch that scene, David Allen Greer does a really good job of looking at Captain Taylor. And when Sergeant Waters says batting practice, he goes, like, dude, you are lying. You came
Yeah.
in bullying us. You're about to fight Peterson, and as soon as the white man walks in, you snap into shape, and you're
Right.
submissive and
Right.
deferring. So, do you have anything to say about that, bro, or any of that?
That's another powerful scene. If I recall, there are so many, so much of the film is about the flashbacks. When Captain Davenport goes to interview someone, they'll start to speak on a certain interaction with Sergeant Waters, and then there's kind of this crossfade into the backstory, and they instead of that character telling you what happened, they show you what happened. So for the Peterson interview, we find out, and for those of us who are not in the military, all these names and all these ranks actually mean something. So for the Denzel interview, you find out that he is PFC Peterson, Private First Class. So he is a step above the other players on the team and some of the other people who are in their platoon, because he is a Private First Class, not just a corporal. So Sergeant Waters knows that the Denzel character of PFC Peterson, he's a step above the other guys. And when he speaks up, he's not just speaking up for himself, but there's a difference in their ranks. So yeah, the other guys did kind of step back and go, oh boy, what happened? And they all got behind Sergeant Waters. But yeah, that was a powerful moment because he did step up to Sergeant Waters' authority, no matter how bad or how wrong it was. We did go, oh wow, okay, he's different from the other guys.
He's an alpha. He's not afraid of
Correct.
Sergeant Waters.
Correct. He
He
understood what was going on.
Sorry?
He understood what was happening, within those barracks.
Yes.
It was not fair. That was bullying.
Yes. And he was gonna speak out. He wasn't gonna be afraid. And we'll come back to that because we learned something later about how Sergeant Waters actually saw Peterson, even though immediately after that they do get into a fight.
Right.
And Sergeant Waters gets beat initially, but he resorts to some dirty tactics to win that fight.
Yes.
So in a fight, anything goes. I guess I'll just say that. So, but Peterson, at the end of his interview, he communicates to Captain Davenport that, yeah, we had a hard time, but I did challenge him. I just kind of stayed away from him after that. So you don't really suspect that they had any other run-ins later on. Okay. So Captain Davenport is slowly piecing this thing together. He talks to the two white officers after getting permission. Their position was, again, yeah, we had a run-in with him. He disrespected us. We did beat him up a little bit, but we left him on the road. He was alive when we left him. I'm jumping ahead here for time's sake.
Sure.
Captain Davenport goes to question Henson, who's the pianist. He plays piano for church services. He doesn't want to talk to Captain Davenport initially. And then he tells Captain Davenport about the night. I think he was out drinking. Someone got shot in town, and one of the participants ran back to their barracks. Was probably Henson involved in it, but Sergeant Waters uses that opportunity to really trap CJ, to trick him, framed him, provoked him into punching him, to hitting him, and gets him thrown in the stockades. Okay.
Yes.
So that was a pivotal moment. And then later on, Captain Davenport interviews David Allen Greer's character Cobb, Corporal Cobb.
Corporal Cobb.
And Corporal Cobb divulges that, yeah, Sergeant Waters was on CJ all the time. And Sergeant Waters seemed to really have it in for him somehow. And when I went to go comfort CJ at the stockades, CJ was losing it, number one, being locked up. He lost his dust and everything. But he really wasn't handling being locked up really well. And Sergeant Waters actually visited him. And then we learn some of what Sergeant Waters said to CJ, but we also learn we start to see how Sergeant Waters sees the Black race, its plight in America, and how some Black people within the race are either hurting or helping the race. Let me play this really quickly. Let's see.
See, the Black race can't afford you no more. Oh, there used to be a time we'd see somebody like you singing, clowning, yassa bossing, and we wouldn't do anything. Folks like that.
So he starts to separate out and delineate, okay, there are people like you who are hurting the race, making us look all like fools, and then there's everybody else. And to get ahead, we can't have any more people like you around. Now, this is a line that really resonated with me when I was thinking about doing this.
The day of the Geechee is gone, boy. And you going with it. We can't let nobody go on believing we all fools like you.
So Geechee was a term, and people in the South, from South Carolina, they talk about themselves that way. There is a Geechee culture and a Geechee population. I was just looking at a tweet on Twitter X the other day. So that's a distinct cultural demographic with its own distinct roots and lineages. But in this movie, Sergeant Waters uses it in a derogatory way. These are ignorant, country, backwater, buffoonish Black people. And he can't stand them. He hates them.
Yeah.
And they are holding the race back. Do you want to say anything about that, bro?
Yeah, if I were in a situation like that, I would have told CJ, the Sarge will take every opportunity to degrade you, put you down, insult you, get you to do extra work. He will take every chance that he has to bully you. So you need to be a couple of steps ahead, but also figure out when he's giving you a direction or when he's giving you an insult. When he's giving you an insult, don't listen, right? You are better than that. He's just bullying you. And right now we have to survive long enough before we can get over to Germany and actually fight. Like, this guy's a bully. And when he comes around, and there were scenes where, like in the barracks scene after the baseball game, where they all needed to be aware of when he walks in the room and when he's around. It shouldn't be a surprise when he walks in, right? But it seems like there were times where he would show up and they'd kind of be surprised, like, oh, Sarge's here. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So someone should have just say, hey, CJ, be yourself. But when Sarge is around, don't get into all that Geechee culture, because it's just gonna get you in trouble. Okay.
Okay.
So
So eventually, Captain Davenport, he's piecing all this together. He's working his way around, and he works his way back around to Wilkie, who, as we see throughout the movie, is kind of like Sergeant Waters' lapdog. He's his lackey. He
yeah,
follows him
yeah,
around. He kisses his rear end, and some of the guys in the platoon make fun of him for that. And later in the movie, Wilkie actually comes forward and says what Sergeant Waters actually felt inside about CJ and others like CJ. We see early on in the film some instances of Sergeant Waters being nice to CJ and
yeah.
actually celebrating him early on. We see after CJ plays a song in the beginning of the movie, Sergeant Waters and Wilkie go over and meet him to get to know him better, and you think Sergeant Waters likes him, but in this particular scene, we actually hear what Sergeant Waters thinks about CJ and why. I'm going to play these two drops, and then we'll talk about it some more.
Okay.
You know the damage one ignorant Negro can do.
So in that scene, CJ is playing, and Sergeant Waters and Wilkie are looking at him. Then they turn around to the bar. You can see CJ in the mirror, and it's really brilliant cinematography because CJ dims out. You can't see him when Sergeant Waters tells a story about his fighting days in the First World War and how they had a successful battle, a successful campaign. They were feeling good, the black soldiers, and the white soldiers told all the French girls that they had tails and ate bananas and they were monkeys. And so they got one soldier, one Geechee, one ignorant guy, to put on a tail and to put on a performance. And you can really see in this scene how much it hurts and how much it angers Sergeant Waters. And he comes to the conclusion that, hey, look, there are those among us who, if we let them go, they'll just keep destroying us and holding us back. And then he reveals this to Wilkie.
My daddy told me we got to turn our backs on this kind, Wilkie. Close our ranks to the chitlins, the collard greens, the cornbread style.
So his dad told him from a young age, there are certain black folks we need to turn our backs on. And there are certain black folks we need to get rid of. Okay. And keep an eye on the Memphis kid. Let me know what he does. We're not, the race is not going to go down because of fools like CJ. So you see inside Sergeant Waters at that time, and you see, okay, in his mind, he's not seeing one black race. He's seeing different groups within the race. And there are certain groups that he can't allow to go on because they're going to ruin it for everybody.
Yeah, that's a powerful scene. That is a powerful scene, especially when they do like the camera move with the mirror. It's like a camera move and also a pullback on Sergeant Waters and Wilkie. And then you realize where the camera was and that they were seeing CJ in the mirror as he's performing. Yeah, that's a powerful scene.
And I just realized this as I was putting those drops together 40 years later. If you listen to that scene when Sergeant Waters is telling that story, they put in French. It's very, very subtle. You almost can't hear it. They put in French. I don't know if it's an accordion or what that instrument is, but you could hear the sound of an instrument that French. You can hear French music when he's telling that story. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's very, very subtle, and if you're not listening for it, you won't hear it. But it's taking you back to that time and that frustration that he's feeling with what this guy did. And him and the black officers, the other black soldiers, they slit his neck. And then he says, when he asked us, what did I do wrong? He said, this guy asked us what he did wrong. Well, that's what he did wrong. So to conclude the film, I'm going to take us to the conclusion. We're at 55 minutes. Ultimately, so Wilkie shares Sarge's true feelings for CJ Memphis, and that he actually planted the gun in the barracks. And then Captain Davenport puts the final piece together, and he realizes that Peterson and Smalls may have been involved in Sergeant Waters' death, his murder. So he tracks down Smalls first, and there's the classic line. One of my female friends loved this line. It was a color purple-esque line. "It was Peterson, sir. It wasn't me. It was Peterson." You know. And so then Smalls, we flash back to when Smalls and Peterson actually walk up on Sergeant Waters, drunk and a little bit beaten up on the side of the road. And so we come full circle, and Sergeant Waters shares with them some of how he feels and what he thought of CJ. Hold on.
It's the only way you can win. See, CJ? He could never make it. He was a clown. A clown in blackface. A nigger.
Word again. But he says CJ could never make it. He was a clown in blackface. So that's how he saw CJ. That's how he saw Black people like CJ and others like him. Right. And then, so then the producers and Norman Jewison, they take us full circle back to this line right here.
They still hate you.
So we see that Sergeant Waters was feeling a lot of things, but he was also feeling some guilt over what happened to CJ. I think he was a little bit haunted by it, because when he was talking to Peterson and Smalls, he said, "Wait a minute, listen, it's CJ." So I think that was haunting him a little bit. He was feeling some guilt, but I think he was also feeling with "they still hate you." I think he was saying, no matter what you do, and we're going to come back to this at the end, no matter what you do, they're still going to hate you. They're still going to look at you as a Black person, and I'll just say Negro. They're still going to look at you like that. And that's when Denzel and Peterson tells him, "Peterson, don't," you know, and Peterson kind of takes justice into his own hands and shoots Sergeant Waters twice. Do you want to say anything, bro?
Sure. What's one of the subtle things about that scene is when you see, or it's that scene is told in flashback by
Smalls.
Private Smalls. When Smalls and Peterson are on guard duty, you actually, I think for the first time, but also in the back end of the film, you get to see Denzel's character, PFC Peterson. You get to see his stripes on his shoulder. Wow. And you realize, oh, wait a minute, he's got one stripe. Now, I don't know if PFCs have one stripe, or what the case is, for those of, for all of our viewers, who know about the military and about the stripe system, what that all means. But I've watched the movie in pieces over the last couple of days, and when I was watching that scene, I said, wait a minute, PFC Peterson, he's got one stripe. So I would just add that, but then I would also add that that his character, PFC Peterson, it seems as though in every scene he is almost fully aware of what is going on and the power dynamics between everyone in the room or everyone around. I believe that after the interview scene, no. This was in the scene where Captain Davenport goes to interview Private Henson. And for some of our younger viewers, our Gen Xers, our Gen Y, millennials, for those of you who watched the show Moesha featuring Brandy, Private Henson played Brandy's father. When he goes to visit Private Henson at the church, there is this pullback shot where the camera is in the back of the church, and it slowly moves to the front of the church, and it shows the congregation, which is the platoon, the black soldiers, and then all of the white officers. Now, in the back of the church, what you see all the black soldiers singing, but they've got their hands behind their backs and they're swaying back and forth.
Wow.
Right? The only person who's not swaying back and forth is PFC Peterson. He's standing straight, and he's barely mouthing the words of the song, which leads me to believe that he may or may not be a Christian, but he's watching everybody, and he's figuring out the power dynamics in that room. Also, I just want to touch on his awareness of where he was in the baseball game. When he got up to bat, he knew CJ was batting next or batting behind him. So to get on base, he bunts, because I believe he knows CJ is playing behind him, and that CJ is probably going to either get on base or hit a home run. So there were just very, very, very subtle scenes where you can see, like, if you're watching Denzel, because we are, if you watch this movie now, you go, oh wait, that's Denzel. He's the equalizer. He's Alonzo from Training Day. Yeah, if you just watch him in scenes, he'll give you little clues as to who that character really is. So.
Well, on that same vein of him being able to read the room, so going back to that scene, Smalls tried to flee the base, and it looks like Peterson tried to flee the base too, because they're both abducted. So Smalls is running after a train, and he doesn't catch the train, and the military police are there. It looks like Peterson tried to run too, and they probably conspired and said, he's onto us, we got to run. But when Peterson is brought into the room, you could see him kind of he's got his handcuffs on. You can see him kind of look around, and then he goes right over to Smalls and says, "You told him, didn't you?"
Yeah.
So he realizes Smalls and Davenport were in there talking, and he puts two and two together instantly, and he says, "You told him, didn't you?" And he laughs. And then him and Captain Davenport go into their final dialogue, which is interesting because it was kind of Captain Davenport asks him the question that Sergeant Waters arguably should have been asked, which was, what gives you the right to determine who's fit to live? What gives you the right to determine who can be a Negro, who could be a part of the Black race? He asks that to Peterson, which to me was a bit of a head scratcher, but that question should have gone to Sergeant Waters, because he was the one who was walking around with all of the self-hate and the colorism and the bigotry and all those things. He was the one who that question should have been addressed to. So I thought that was interesting that Charles Fuller wrote that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just want to show this visual. I used this in a drop. I think this kind of shows what my brother was talking about in terms of Denzel's his nonverbal acting in this movie. his reading the room, his eyes, the way he's looking at Sergeant Waters there. You could sometimes actors act without saying something. Denzel did. They all did a lot of that in this movie, but Denzel in particular. Yeah,
absolutely.
And so then after that, it cuts to Peterson and Smalls get taken away and imprisoned, and then we go to the last scene where Captain Davenport and Captain Taylor are on the Jeep, and the parade, the parade, the procession, or whatever you want to call it, that's going on, and he tells Captain Davenport, I'm gonna have to get used to seeing so many colored officers. And Captain Davenport says, "Oh, you will. Like, there's going to be more. I'm not the only one." And Charles Fuller, that's what he said in this article. He said that's people weren't used to that back in 1981, so it's no surprise that this didn't go to Broadway until now. So that's the plot and the story. We kind of tried to sprint through it, but. So I think the big question, bro, and I think this gets back to your motivation for recommending this. What does this mean now? What do you see in terms of when you look around yourself now? Like, what do you see with the significance of this movie?
Oh boy, that is a good question, bro. First off, I would say that. For all of us for all of your viewers who may not be African American, or if you are not African American, I would say this is, if you are not African American, but you have Black neighbors and you have black coworkers, this is almost necessary viewing to understand the dynamics amongst melanated people and how we see and interact with each other, but also the why. And you can also put in the context how someone's background determines how you see them act and carry themselves, and how they interact with the world. It's good to pay attention to small things like someone's last name, or where they're from, or where they went to school. But then also I'd say just treat everyone well. But it is important to pick up on things like where someone's from, and what their last name may be, or those kinds of things. This movie is very relevant. It's still relevant. It has aged well. This is an amazing piece of art in terms of what it can teach someone, what it can teach anyone about the history, and also the horror story of African Americans in this country.
Yeah. So I think that it's relevant because it was the context is the military, but yes. I think we're going through a lot of this still now.
Yes.
And all throughout our lives, we're post civil rights, so we didn't live through Jim Crow, but we're still facing those questions. What is Black? Who is Black? Who deserves to be a part of the race? Who is one of us? Who isn't? Who's speaking for us? Who's holding us back? Which images are misrepresenting us? Okay. Yeah. Who's in charge of us? Okay. Sergeant Waters was clearly, he was a non-commissioned officer. He was in charge of his men. I know sometimes you've been a fan of complexion. He was a lighter skinned gentleman all the men in his platoon were dark brown. That's one
Mm.
thing. But I'm going to put this in the form of a question. Even today, are there Black people who are put in charge of the others? Are there Black people and leaders, political officials, who are put in charge of the rest of the group, right? And are they working in the best interests of the rest of the group? Okay. Because we're kind of seeing that now. There's a lot of question now about what are our Black elected officials. Are they working for us? Are they working for someone else? Should they be there? Do they deserve to be there? And I'm thinking about, Peterson, his voice, that essence. There's a lot of that today. Okay.
Yes.
That
100.
Yeah, there's a lot of that today.
Yeah, I would even, that's a great question, bro. That's a great point. I would even say, for the average person, whether you're African American, whether you're SBA, whether you're ADOS, or depending upon your background, the average person, we know and acknowledge leadership when we see it and when we hear it. Luckily, we are at a point at the history of our country and our culture where we are witnessing the first coaching football season of Coach Prime, Deion Sanders, and one of the things that 100% resonates with everyone when you listen to him speak is, yes, it is football, but you understand that his message resonates with people because they understand that what he's saying is true, and what he's saying, he is giving you actionable goals. Whatever he speaks on, you can go and practice it, or you can go and do it, and it's going to work. For some of these elected officials that we see now in some of these struggling cities, if the mayors are melanated in the news, some of these cities are really having a tough time, and the leadership is lacking. When some of these elected officials who are melanated and who look like us, when they get in front of the camera, you don't believe what you're hearing, because you know that what you're hearing cannot function and operate and be successful in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
No matter who's in charge, you know that what you're hearing is not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the others, when you hear leadership that will work, it resonates with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm also thinking back to Sergeant Waters' words about CJ. He can dance, he can sing, he can do all these fantastical things, but at the end of the day, they still think he's, the word I'm not going to use,
He's a
but
Geechee.
also a Geechee,
Yeah.
the N word, and but also he's a big black buck. He's a show horse. But also around election time.
Yes.
What images are trotted out in front of Black people? Performers, sometimes some of them who are the worst role models,
Yeah.
and those the worst examples for our people, and those people are used to get our booties to the polls. Those people are used to rally support to a particular side.
Absolutely.
So there are Black people who look at that and say, you know what, it's insulting that they would trot this person out. Is this what they think of us? Do they think that we're dumb enough to respond to this particular artist or this particular actor?
Yeah.
And this particular politician is just a figurehead anyway. Do they think
Right.
we're dumb enough to fall for this? And these people they're trotting out, these particular elected officials, they're ultimately hurting the group. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. There's a lot there that we're all still working our way through and navigating. It seems like we're always gonna have these things. Yeah. Now I will say, having attended an HBCU,
Wow.
and I got this feeling when I watched Glory as well, starring Denzel. That going to HBCU, watching A Soldier Story and watching Glory, those really reminded me of going to my HBCU and that experience, and even the experience, even my experiences here in DC, and you know what, in some regards, even our experiences growing up in Buffalo, because when we talk differently, when we comport ourselves differently, when some of us are more street, some of us are more refined, debonair. You know, sometimes we give each other the side eye. You know, sometimes we don't always relate to each other.
True.
But we're all Black, so we're kind of expected to. But when you put all of us together sometimes, and we come from different walks of life, there are frictions. You know, you're not Black enough. You talk funny. You dress funny. Those differences arise, and I saw a lot of that at my HBCU. I've seen a lot of that throughout my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I heard a lot, going to grade school, that I don't speak like some of the others, like some of the other Black classmates. I've heard that a lot at several jobs. That, oh, Amal, you don't talk like the other Black people. Um, so yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's something, part of my message is that goes on into adulthood. I mean, that doesn't, I mean, you would think it would go away, but even in a city like this, it doesn't go away. We still, as Black people, make those judgments on each other.
Mm-hmm.
We still have set images in our mind of what Black is and what Black isn't, and who's real and who isn't, and who's down and who isn't. It just keeps going on and on and on. So yeah, so it still has relevance for today. Who's in charge of us? Yeah, who's speaking for us? Who's representing us properly? And what's their agenda? So yeah. Well, bro, we're at an hour and 20 minutes. Do you have anything else you want to say?
I was, as I finished watching A Soldier Story maybe 20 minutes before we got online. I noticed that in some of the final scenes, after Captain Davenport had interviewed the white officers, Lieutenant Byrd and Captain Wilcox, while they were in the room with Captain Davenport and Captain Taylor, they said, Captain Wilcox said, we were not issued 45s, or the weapon that actually did in Sergeant Waters. And that's when Captain Davenport realized, well, if they were not issued 45s, then I have to find who was on guard duty that had a 45. Now, I'm only saying that because it was a .45 style sidearm that Sergeant Waters used to frame CJ. When Wilkie looked under CJ's bed and the camera could see that there was nothing there, but then all of a sudden Wilkie stood up and he had a .45 in his hand. He was like, Sarge, check this out. So we see that it's just so serendipitous that the character of the Sarge was done in by the same style weapon or firearm that he used to frame CJ.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good point, bro. I didn't pick up on that.
For all the gun enthusiasts, you know, so yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, we're gonna wind this down. So, do you have any parting words, bro? Any?
No, bro. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me on your platform. Hopefully this video ages well as we get better. Using these streaming technologies. Maybe we can get into doing the reaction videos where we can watch a scene and react to some of the other YouTubers do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this one should age fairly well, and everyone in our family on both sides can watch this. Hopefully the younger cousins can watch this and get something out of it, and they can watch a soldier story and get something out of it as a child and watch it later as an adult and still get something out of it. So,
All right,
good times.
All right, bro. Well, I will.
Right.
Yeah, we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, bro. Thanks, man. Love you, bro.
All right, love you too. Peace.
Peace.
All right, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and wind this down. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. If you please like, share, and subscribe if you're new. If you want to make a donation to the channel, my Cash App and PayPal are below in the description box. Please consider signing up for my newsletter. That's in the description box as well. I won't show it today, but please consider signing up. And with that, if you haven't seen A Soldier Story, check it out. It has a lot of relevant messages for today, and yeah, especially with an election year coming up. A lot of if you look closely, a lot of the themes that are addressed in the movie are being talked about on a yearly basis, but now especially with this election coming up. So, all right, everyone. As always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Always try to do your best. Take care, and I'll talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.